draft may be over, but NFL rosters aren't set just yet. They're still evolving until the kickoff of the NFL season. So in this live stream, I'm going to be providing 8 possible post-draft NFL blockbuster trades. Big names, big deals across the NFL that, guys, could still happen. So if that sounds good, get in that comment section. Let me know how you feel about these moves, and let me know a specific player to team fit that you would love to see for these names that could be dealt. Let's get to it. Let's begin with the first name that actually corresponds with what happened at the NFL draft, and that's Kayvon Thibodeaux of the New York G-Men. He could be, I don't know for certain, but he could be on the block. I have Thibodeaux potentially being dealt to the Los Angeles Chargers for a 3rd-round pick in 2026. And I made it simple for these trades, guys. All of the trades are going to involve 2026 draft capital. I'm not going to be saying 2028 first-round picks. We're not going crazy, all right? But Kayvon Thibodeaux is certainly a player that could be on the move. He's, of course, a former first-round pick of the Giants, I believe 5th overall. The crazy thing about him is I think he's only 24 years old. In 2023, he had 11.5 sacks. Last year, he had 5.5 sacks, only in 12 games. He actually had the most quarterback hits of his career with 17. So he's a good edge player, but I think the reason why the Giants drafted Abdul Carter is not only is he a special player, but he's a special pass rusher. Kayvon, as good as he's been, as solid as he's been for the Giants, he's just not quite that level. But I still do think he could help an NFL team, especially one like the Chargers, who could use another asset along their defensive line, could use another rotation piece at their edge position. Thibodeaux is an absolute machine when it comes to playing a lot of snaps. He is just a relentless player in terms of playing on all 3 downs, being able to defend the run with power and being able to get after the quarterback. I would love him in Los Angeles to complement Khalil Mack for 2025. And you look at his current structure in terms of his contract and where he could be in 2026, going to another team outside of New York and playing more snaps and contributing to a successful NFL team that might be in the playoffs and make a playoff run, that could really aid him to getting the big contract that he seeks in 2026 NFL free agency. The Chargers are a team that I think, when looking at the draft, they didn't prioritize the edge position, despite maybe needing to freshen up their front 7. That feels like the missing piece to their team is just adding one more piece to their pass rush. Khalil Mack is only getting older. Their leading sacker from last year is a second-year player in Tuipulotu, who I always mess his name up. He had a good rookie season, but he's not an edge one. And Mack, you don't really want him to be entering the final years of his career, a guy that you have to get 10 sacks out of. So Thibodeaux would just add another piece to their pass rush to be able to do a lot of different funky things within their scheme and add another layer of depth. They love to rotate those guys. That's why they signed a guy like Bud Dupree last year. He remains on the roster as well. So they like to rotate these guys, keep them fresh. Khalil Mack, keep him fresh at his older age. These are reasons why he could be a Charger. 42nd in PFF grade, 32nd in pass rush grade. Again, guys, not a guy that's going to totally change a defense, but could certainly connect with the Chargers and be a guy that takes them over the top in terms of their defense. Solid defense last year, but could use more pieces to their pass rush. Getting to the comments before we get to the next trade. That was the first one that came to mind because of the Abdul Carter draft pick. I don't think they need all of these different edge players. Now, there still could be plans for the Giants to have these 3 involved, being Brian Burns and Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeaux, and it's certainly doable. We've seen Giants teams in the past be able to play with these 3 different players or 4 different players in a rotation. But if they want to get extra assets for the future of their team, then it would make sense to move on from him before it's too late. Shout out to Singh in the YouTube chat. Shout out to Big Al in the YouTube chat. Thank you guys for joining up. We have Tyreek Hill should be traded. He was left off the list only because I read recently that he probably will not be traded. So I didn't want to waste our time talking about Tyreek Hill for the 5 millionth time. I feel like I've talked about Tyreek Hill 1,000 times already. So yeah, Tyreek Hill could be moved. He may even should be moved. Will he be moved? I doubt it. I don't know. The Rams need a linebacker, a wide receiver, and a corner. We will be talking about the Rams. They don't think they need a wide receiver, though. I think you're crazy there. I mean, they got Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams. They just drafted a tight end, okay? And so that's another piece. They extended Tutu Atwell. So I don't know. I feel like the Rams' depth at wide receiver, despite losing Demarcus Robinson and Cooper Kupp, is still pretty darn solid, especially I think they elevated from Kupp to Adams. But I do agree, linebacker and corner could certainly be utilized by the Rams. We're going to talk specifically about the corner position in this video. I don't know if there is a linebacker out there that could be traded, but it's possible. Pickens to the Cowboys. That may or may not be discussed in this video. Pickens is not getting traded. We'll see. Sutton to Dallas. I don't think Courtland Sutton's going anywhere. I don't think Denver's going to trade Courtland Sutton. Nick Chubb to Chicago. Nick Chubb is, are you saying Bradley Chubb or Nick Chubb? I need clarification there. But Nick Chubb, if it's Nick Chubb, he's a free agent. So, yeah, I mean, you could just sign him. That's not a trade. But that could happen. I would also look out maybe for Dallas to sign him. I think there's a couple teams that could still utilize a running back. All right, let's get to the next trade. Our number 2 trade on the board today is going to be a move for Trey Hendrickson. There's a team that I desperately wanted to see pursue a pass rusher in the draft, and they didn't do it. The Washington Commanders probably have the worst, and that's my opinion. You can hate all you want. I think they have the worst pass rush in the NFL, guys. I might be crazy, but when your best pass rusher is Dorrance Armstrong, I don't think you're winning the Super Bowl despite going to the NFC Championship last year. I just don't think you're able to win a Super Bowl, no offense to Dorrance Armstrong, with your best pass rusher being a 5.5 sack guy. In fact, if you look at the Commanders' edge rush right now, their edge rush depth chart, okay, you could combine, I did the math for you guys, and I'm not good at math, so it took a lot. Dorrance Armstrong, Dietrich Wise, Clelin Ferrell, Jacob Martin. This is the edge depth chart of the Commanders. They totaled 16.5 sacks last year. Do you know how many sacks Trey Hendrickson had? 17.5. So that's why the Commanders will send their 2nd round pick to Cincinnati to get Trey Hendrickson. That is if Hendrickson gets traded, which is not likely, I would say, because I think the Bengals really desperately want to keep him. So I think a 2nd round pick would be enough to let him go if they can't find a contract negotiation that works for 2025, right? Like, Hendrickson's so important to the Bengals. Without him, their defense is pathetic. Their defense is nothing. It was already paper thin last year. So yes, they drafted Shamar Stewart, which maybe lessens the degree for Trey Hendrickson, the desperation for Trey Hendrickson to stay on board. And if something doesn't work out, they can still move on from him because that draft pick maybe loosens things up. You also have to look at the Commanders and say they lost Dante Fowler in free agency, who was their leading sacker last season with over 10 sacks. He left to Dallas, back to Dallas, I should say. Jonathan Allen, probably their best overall pass rusher over the last 5 or 6 years. He signed with the Minnesota Vikings. So I just think the Commanders could desperately use somebody to get to the quarterback. And when you're looking at how the Commanders are built, they're built to score points. They're built to get leads. And they're built to finish teams in the 4th quarter with a ferocious pass rush like Trey Hendrickson. So I think it could definitely make sense. If he is going to get traded, I feel like the Commanders, they've been going all in for Laramie Tunsil, for Deebo Samuel. Why not finish it off with a defensive difference maker, a guy that they don't currently have on the team? one of the best edge rushers in football, Trey Hendrickson. He was nearly the defensive player of the year last year. Duke Tobin of the Bengals also said there was no update for Trey Hendrickson after the draft. So it is possible that he gets traded, but it's also possible that he doesn't get traded. They didn't say that they're outright not trading him. So it's still a possibility. Getting back to the chat before we get to trade number 3. Checking. There we go. Titans getting anybody. I very much considered the Titans for one player that I'll discuss. And when that player comes up, I will bring them up. But no, not for me. But I do feel like there's actually 2 players back to back on this list that I considered Tennessee. They popped into my head. They were one of the 32 teams to pop into my head. Kirk not going anywhere. Maybe, maybe not. I will say disgruntled quarterbacks don't typically stay on their teams. Disgruntled quarterbacks don't typically stay on their team. So Kirk Cousins is going to have to get along if he's going to stay. Dak needs to be cut. You're hilarious. Pickens to the Raiders. Could happen. Honestly, I would laugh if that happened, but I don't see Pete Carroll going after that type of personality right now with the build of the team as currently constructed. I feel like they would have to be a couple years down the road to be able to take that chance, but that's just my opinion. Hendrickson to the Rams would be sick. It would be sick. Hendrickson is sick, but the Rams have a great pass rush already. I don't think they're willing to put that money. If they're going to put the money anywhere, it's going to go to the secondary, guys. One player that the Rams could potentially trade for is Jaire Alexander of the Green Bay Packers. But I do not have them trading for Alexander. I considered it, but I ultimately went with the Las Vegas Raiders for a 3rd round pick. We talked about the Raiders already trying to get George Pickens. What about a cornerback? And I bring up a cornerback because not only does Pete Carroll love him some cornerbacks, but also at the same time, the Raiders have the worst cornerback depth chart in football. So I'm looking at the NFL depth charts and I'm saying, Washington, your pass rush sucks. Raiders, your cornerback depth chart sucks. I'm sorry. You could use these players. And when you look at Washington, for sure is going to be a contender this year. The Raiders have kind of situated themselves to say, we have Geno Smith. We went in for Chip Kelly. We have Pete Carroll. It's not like Pete Carroll is getting any younger. It's not like Geno Smith's getting any younger. So despite their flaws as a team and a roster, they still probably want to win right now. So going after a piece like Alexander would definitely elevate their defense to a different level. Their front is probably the most underrated defensive line in football, in my opinion. Max Crosby, Christian Wilkins, Malcolm Kuntz. It's a good defensive line. Their linebacker position leaves something to be desired. If they added a corner that could shut down half the field when healthy, key being when healthy, which is the reason why the Packers might move on from Alexander, right? That is where that would change their defense. It would allow them to man up a little bit more with opposing offenses. It would allow them to shade to a certain side of the field. It would allow them to contend with the better receivers in football and allow them to do some different tricky things with their coverages. Also, the defensive coordinator of the Raiders, Patrick Graham, is a former Patriot guy who, with the Patriots, their defenses, take it from a fan, were always at their best when they had the Ty Law or the Asante Samuel or the Darrelle Revis or the Stephon Gilmore or now the Christian Gonzalez. So they like having that type of player. Also, you talk about Spy Tech and Tom Brady being involved in decisions from Tampa Bay. There will be a little bit of that influence as well. So it's a 3rd round pick for Alexander. I thought about a 4th round pick. Alexander's one of those players that's really hard to figure out what his value would be because when he's on the field, he's extremely talented. He's seen as a top 10 corner in football as a talent, but he's had some off the field drama, not necessarily bad things happening, but just drama. And that has all stemmed from his inability to stay on the field and be healthy, right? So the last 3 seasons, he hasn't exactly contributed to the Packers consistently. But you look at the Raiders depth chart, they have, they lost Nate Hobbs. They lost Jack Jones, arguably their 2 top corners in 2024. Their projected starters are Jacorian Bennett, a second-year cornerback who's very raw. He goes into year 2. They've got Richardson, who also, I believe, is a second-year player. And then they added Eric Stokes, who was another Packer. Okay, so they like their Packer cornerbacks. He was on and off the field as well, former first-round pick of the Packers. Got some good physical traits, but couldn't prove to stay on the field, couldn't prove to consistently cover anybody either when he was on the field. Darnay Holmes is also their nickel corner, who isn't exactly great. Giants fans would know that. They did draft Darian Porter, who I'm really excited about. He's like the freakiest cornerback in the draft, 6'3", 6'4", 4.3 speed, incredible length, size, speed, combination, all that. But he is a project. He didn't play very much in college, so I don't know if he's going to start right away or not. He's probably somebody they want to allow to grow behind the scenes a little bit. So Alexander was the 10th graded corner last year when he was on the field. This would take the Raiders defense to a different level. And in my opinion, take my thought of their team to a different level in terms of what they could get to, because I don't trust them to cover a soul this year right now. So that's our third trade. Getting back to the chat, DJ Moore to the Raiders. I don't buy DJ Moore rumors. I don't buy that DJ Moore could be traded personally, just because DJ Moore is too good. And also, I think the whole goal for the Bears is to surround Caleb with weaponry. What about the Browns? The Browns for Alexander or the Browns in general? The Browns, I don't know. I think the only market they would be in is for a wide receiver. I think that would probably be about it. I don't really see them going for anything else. Yeah, I mean, they drafted multiple running backs. Obviously, they have multiple quarterbacks now that they just drafted. I mean, their defense is already loaded. I don't really see any area that they would go trade-wise. Pitts getting traded. Pitts is a possibility. I think that would have happened during the draft, though, if I'm being honest. And the Falcons, they told us what they think. They think they're a contender. They draft, they traded up in the first round to pick 2 edge rushers. They traded away their future first-round pick in order to do that. So they at least believe they're going to contend for this division next year. So I think they would rather keep Kyle Pitts for one more season to see what happens with Penix there. Best offensive trade target for the Giants. I think the best trade target would be Dallas Goedert. But that would take a lot because he plays in Philadelphia. I don't think they're going to go after a wide receiver, personally. They could maybe go for a depth lineman or something to help out their interior offensive line, but there's not a lot of those floating around at this point. I mean, offensive linemen are hard to come by. So maybe if a rookie really shines in one of these camps and that opens up a spot for a guard to get traded, then maybe somebody like that could get traded to the Giants too. Okay, our fourth trade is George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys for a second-round pick. Somebody called it in the chat. It's a rumor. It's been floated out there, maybe even discussed at the draft. I think Dallas could really use George Pickens. Their depth chart right now is, of course, CeeDee Lamb, the great 88. But beyond that, Tolbert, Mingo, and Turpin. I think if we combined last year's production, I don't even think they get to 1,000 yards. I don't even know if they get to 700 yards. So Dallas is desperate for a wide receiver. Now, that being said, I think there are still a couple targets in free agency, like Amari Cooper, that they might be able to sign. But Pickens would be fascinating because I think Jerry Jones is just crazy enough to go for George Pickens. He might be his type of crazy. Plus, Pickens complementing CeeDee Lamb would be an awesome combination. Lamb in the slot, moving him around, routing people up, separating. It would be really hard to double team CeeDee Lamb if you have George Pickens out wide, right? Like George Pickens is one of the best downfield targets in the NFL. He's also one of the best yak producers in the NFL on slants and, dig routes and things like that. He led the NFL in 2023 in yards per reception, 18.1 did George Pickens. So that combining with CeeDee Lamb would be dangerous for Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. 1,140 yards in 2023. Then in 2024, he had 900 yards in 14 games. He graded as the 24th best receiver in football. And in my opinion, George Pickens is at least top 25 receiver in football. I think he is a really talented player. I mean, he has size, acrobatic catching ability. He can make all the different contested catches. He's dangerous with the ball in his hands. He doesn't have the most refined route running, but he's just so physically special that he is tough to cover, right? There's been rumors surrounding him pretty much all season long since DK Metcalf went to the Steelers. That being said, if the Steelers do sign Aaron Rodgers, it would be absolutely foolish for the Pittsburgh Steelers to trade George Pickens. I mean, it would make absolutely no sense. They would have to, I don't know what would happen. I mean, Rodgers might just retire if that happens. So I don't know, but yeah, I think the Cowboys would take their main need and totally make it a strength. Wide receiver, making it a strength. And they also didn't address it in the draft, which is also fascinating. I don't know why they chose to do that, but I did feel that Dallas had a really good draft. I actually really liked their draft. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you can't draft everything, I guess. Any Bills trade targets? I think the Bills are always relevant for trade discussion. I would not include them in the cornerback discussion at this point because they did draft three, not one, not two, three cornerbacks in the draft. Maxwell Hairston, I love that pick for them. I think he's going to start immediately. If they do trade for somebody, wide receiver would still be a thought, and then maybe a defensive end. But honestly, I think they're probably just going to maybe sign some veterans, and that's about it. I don't really see them doing much more than what they've already done. I think they've had a pretty good offseason. Best edge for the Bears to trade for? There is one that I want to talk about right now. Jadeveon Clowney, who I have being traded to the Detroit Lions, but actually the team that came up very close to Detroit in my mind was Chicago. So that's a target for the Chicago Bears. Jadeveon Clowney, who is on the Carolina Panthers right now, for a 6th round pick is my proposed trade to the Carolina Panthers. He is much older at this point, but he's been very productive throughout his career. For many seasons, been about a 7 to 9 sack producer. Last year, had 5.5 in 14 games. In 2023, he had 9.5 with the Baltimore Ravens. Clowney is still a decent edge, too, on a football team, and I think could help a contending team or a team that wants to take that next step in terms of a playoff pursuit, like Chicago or like Detroit, where I think he would be a perfect complement for Aiden Hutchinson. Detroit let go of Zadarius Smith, who I still believe is a free agent. They might bring back Zadarius Smith. They might even be able to trade for Clowney and bring back Zadarius Smith. But Clowney and Smith are a very similar type of players. So that's kind of the first instance where I thought, Clowney, Smith, maybe they would trade for Clowney. Clowney, really good against the run, really powerful player, sets the edge very well. That's very important in Detroit. Very athletic. And he'd be used well with his explosiveness on, stunts, games, and blitzes that Detroit looks for on 3rd down. They love to blitz on 3rd down. So I think Clowney would be very effective in that manner. He's always been the most effective in that type of scheme. And then you look at Detroit's edge rush. They didn't really address it in the draft beyond like a 5th round selection, which isn't good enough for me. Okay. And they do need a partner for Hutchinson, I think, to take them to the next level. Pascal and Muhammad are more role players and kind of rotation players than they are true starters, in my opinion. And when you look at Carolina, the reason they would trade Jadeveon Clowney, not only has it been rumored that they might trade Jadeveon Clowney, but they took 2 edge rushers in the 2nd round. Okay. 2 edge rushers in this, I think the 2nd and the 3rd round, maybe. I'm not sure if they were both in the 2nd round, but 2nd and the 3rd round. Okay. And then also they signed Patrick Jones from the Vikings. So that's 3 different edge rushers that they signed or added to this team. Plus they still have DJ Wonham as well, who they signed last offseason along with Jadeveon Clowney. And Clowney is an older player. And if he didn't really love playing back home in Carolina for 1 year, maybe he would like to go to a contending team like Detroit, where he was seemingly having a great time in Baltimore. That was winning a lot of games, and he seemed to be, just having the time of his life. So I don't know. I feel like Jadeveon Clowney still can contribute to a team. I'm not saying he's going to be anything special, but an edge 2, that would be perfect for Detroit. Nothing crazy. No Trey Hendrickson, but Jadeveon Clowney can certainly still contribute about 6, 7, 8 sacks in a season. Okay, let's continue. Let's keep it going. Jamie's in the chat said, I would trade a third for Pickens if I was Baltimore. I don't think Baltimore is going to be able to get a wide receiver from the biggest rival, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh better get a quarterback. That's a good point, Charles. I don't disagree. Is a Ramsey trade on the list, says Singh. Yes, it might be. It might not be. You have to stay tuned, Singh. Kirk to the Steelers. Kirk to the Steelers might be a thing. We'll talk about it. Jags can use a D tackle. Yes, they can. I don't understand why they didn't take one single defensive tackle in the entire draft. I think they're counting on Eric Armstead to play that position this year. Would the Rams give up more for Ramsey than they got for him? I don't think so. We'll talk about that. Don't worry. Stay tuned. TJ Watt to the Lions. Good luck. TJ Watt to the Patriots. Now we're talking. Okay. Wide receiver to the Cowboys. We talked about Pickens to the Cowboys already. That's a possibility. I think the other possibility is Amari Cooper. Breece Hall to the Cowboys. I don't buy the Breece Hall stuff. Could be wrong, though. I don't buy it, but that would be pretty fun. Breece Hall is an awesome player. Elijah Moore, a target for the Bills or the Cowboys. I wouldn't see it for the Bills just because, like, he's just the same player that they already have, like, 4 different times over. Like, he's basically a worse version of Khalil Shakir. So in Dallas, yeah, I could see that. Panthers need offensive tackle? No, they don't. Unless Moton is retiring. I don't really see why they would need an offensive tackle. Christian Kirk moved for a late draft pick. I don't think so. I don't know why they would sign him and then trade him. I think he's just there for 1 year. I think they're going to have Jalen Noel learn from the Christian Kirk experience, the Christian Kirk school, because Jalen Noel, who was he compared to? Any guesses? Christian Kirk. Okay. Let's get to the next trade. Dallas Goedert is on the block. Dallas Goedert could make his way to Jadeveon Clowney's old team, that being the Carolina Panthers. Old team in the case that he does get traded. Okay. Dallas Goedert to Carolina for Tremble and a 4th round pick. Tommy Tremble is their current or has been the starting tight end for the Carolina Panthers, but they drafted one this year. They drafted Sanders last year. So they definitely have tight end options beyond Tremble as well. Goedert, though, is one of the best tight ends in football. And the missing piece in Carolina is a difference-making tight end that can run block, that can run routes, and that can catch the football in big situations. Dallas Goedert led the Philadelphia Eagles in receiving yards during the playoffs. I kind of think he's pretty awesome in the clutch. I kind of think he's one of the 6 best tight ends in football, despite the production not being as good as some others like Kittle and McBride and Kelsey. Goedert is just so well-rounded, so good in every area. And I think Philadelphia just might not be able to pay him what he wants when you consider that George Kittle, I believe today, just got paid as the top tight end. That might even entice the Eagles to be, a little bit more afraid, right? And Goedert to even ask for more money, right? Like Goedert might be asking for more money here. Carolina did draft T-Mac to fulfill that X wide receiver position, the outside perimeter playmaker for Bryce Young, that number 1 wide receiver. I thought was a phenomenal draft pick, but they have one missing piece, which is to me a tight end that can do everything well and that can, unlock the middle of the field for Bryce Young, especially long-term post Adam Thielen retirement. I mean, how much longer is Adam Thielen really going to play at this point? I mean, come on. So Philadelphia did say, Howie Roseman, I believe, did say he's part of the team as we speak regarding Dallas Goedert. But that does not give us any long-term security that Dallas Goedert will be a Philadelphia Eagle. And given how many darn talented players that team has, they're going to have to move off of somebody. Goddard's in the final year of his 4-year, $57 million deal with no guaranteed money. So wherever he goes, he's looking for a contract. I think Carolina would be willing to pay him and add that missing piece that their offense desperately needs for Bryce Young. This is the big year for Bryce Young. This is year 3. This is the year that he proves it. He puts up or he shuts up. This is the year that Carolina needs to provide some weaponry for him. So it would make a lot of sense for Goedert to go to Carolina. Now, one team that I did consider, and I did consider for Clowney as well, was the Tennessee Titans to give, a weapon for Cam Ward. But I didn't really see the fit necessarily in the offense. And I also felt like, I don't know, I just kind of preferred Carolina because it feels like Carolina is more willing to pursue something like this, being that Carolina in their division with what they were able to do in the draft, what they've been able to do this offseason, it feels like they're kind of a little bit closer. They're inching closer to Tampa Bay in their division, while Tennessee is still sort of retooling, rebuilding, and not necessarily in a hurry to be a contender. So, yeah, I mean, I like Dallas Goedert to Carolina. There's a bunch of other teams that could do this as well. Next up, we've got at number 7, Kirk Cousins to the Pittsburgh Steelers, as mentioned in the chat. This is if Aaron Rodgers does not go to Pittsburgh, okay? This is the only way this probably will happen or would happen. If Aaron Rodgers does not land in Pittsburgh, Kirk Cousins to Pittsburgh makes a lot of sense. So for a 5th round pick, it would be the deal. Adam Schefter did call the Steelers the only option for Kirk Cousins to potentially get traded to. I would throw in Minnesota potentially, just the possibility to give them some comfort under JJ McCarthy. But currently, the Steelers have Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, a rookie from Ohio State, Skylar Thompson as their quarterback depth chart. And they're competing with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow in the AFC North. Good luck. Bring in a guy like Kirk Cousins in a heavy play action offense, and you could combine the former head coach of the Falcons and the former quarterback of the Falcons and have a pretty interesting offense. At least it would be professionally ran by a guy like Kirk Cousins who could keep the offense on schedule, can play accurate football. You might have to protect him. You might have to run the ball a lot, but with that play action, with that solid defense in Pittsburgh, as long as Cousins takes those turnovers down a little bit and those touchdowns up a little bit, and he has those weapons like DK and Pickens, I think you could do some big things. So, yeah, I mean, if Rodgers doesn't work out, Cousins is your next best veteran option in Pittsburgh. It can't be a rookie. It can't be a guy that's unproven in Pittsburgh, given the roster that they currently have. The 8th and final trade, before I get back to the chat and recap everything for you guys, is Jalen Ramsey to the Los Angeles Rams. I considered as well the Atlanta Falcons because of the connection to Raheem Morris, but the Rams for Ramsey make more sense. Of course, the Rams know him very, very well. In fact, Sean McVay says they still keep in contact. I went for a 3rd round pick in this case, Ramsey back to the Rams. Pretty simple. The Rams did not address corner. I find that odd because everybody was mock drafting them a corner in the 1st round. Everybody. So why did they not pick a corner in the draft? Is it because they know something? You also look a little deeper. The Rams cap space, $17.7 million. Ramsey's cap space or cap hit, $16.6 million. I don't know. Just fits in there. Just fits in. So he's played there before. He's won a Super Bowl. He knows the culture. He knows the system. He could fit right into that star position that the Rams coin it, nickel position at corner. He can play out wide if you want him to, but they have Darius Williams, a former teammate of Jalen Ramsey during those Super Bowl days. They have Ahkello Witherspoon, both solid perimeter corners. They need a guy in the middle of their defense that can make plays, and that would also lessen Jalen Ramsey's speed kind of deteriorating if he's playing in the middle of the field. He's a great tackler. He's very savvy. He's very smart. He's great in zone. So still a very good player, Jalen Ramsey. Just feel like, if you want him on an island all the time, that's probably the weakness of his game at this age. So they could maximize him in that defense, especially with what they do up front. So yeah, I think that's the perfect fit. Ramsey back to the Rams could be the missing piece for them to compete with Philadelphia, beat Philadelphia, and get a 2nd Super Bowl for Matthew Stafford and Sean McVay. So those are your 8 potential post-draft trades, guys. I hope you enjoyed these options. There were plenty of options that came to mind. These are the ones that to me made the most sense, and I tried my best with the compensation. Quickly to the chat, and then we'll get to the recap. So trades for Miami to add a corner or a safety. I think that Alexander is a possibility, and then potentially some veterans that do get cut are also obviously possibilities. I don't think Greg Newsome at this point is getting traded. I don't see it. I think that would have happened if Travis Hunter maybe went to Cleveland, but I don't see it. Budda Baker to Carolina. If you've been paying attention to the Cardinals this offseason, the Cardinals have had one heck of an offseason defensively. I don't see any plans to trade their leader of their team. I just don't see it. Goedert to Denver. They sign Evan Ingram. I don't see that. Thibodeaux to the Bucks. I wouldn't rule it out, but they did sign Hassan Reddick and they drafted 2 edge rushers for depth. Anthony Richardson traded from Indy to who? I don't see that happening this year, maybe next year, but if it does happen, I guess Pittsburgh. I'll throw out Pittsburgh. Maybe just a project backup to like, I don't know, the 49ers or the Rams or something. Who knows? What can the Dolphins get for Ramsey? A 3rd round pick-ish. He was traded for a 3rd round pick and Hunter Long in the last time that he was traded. So a 3rd round pick-ish would make sense. Despite the age getting older, he's coming off one of his better seasons. Michael Mayer to the Eagles. If Goedert is gone, sure, that could make sense if he's gone. But I think the Raiders do want to use 2 tight ends quite a bit because Brock Bowers is just that receiving option that they can split out and do a bunch of things with. Michael Mayer does the dirty work, so to speak, in line and blocking and things like that. So I think they'll keep him, but I wouldn't be shocked if he got traded. Chat on YouTube, Breece Hall or Travis Etienne to the Chiefs. I think Etienne would be more likely. I don't see Dallas Goedert leaving Philly. I don't see it either, like necessarily, but it's possible. I mean, they haven't confirmed that he's staying. Rams definitely ain't beating Philly. I don't know, man. They almost did last year. Trade TJ Watt to the Falcons. TJ Watt is not getting traded, guys. Come on. JJ Watt's more likely to get traded. Okay, let's recap. The first trade is Kayvon Thibodeaux. Giants just drafted Abdul Carter, who could be the next Micah Parsons. So why do they need the former 5th overall pick? He'd be way better with Los Angeles, the Chargers, bolting up their pass rush in 2025. That is for a 3rd round pick. Number 2, Trey Hendrickson for a 2nd to the Washington Commanders. The Commanders, their entire edge depth chart adds up to 16.5 sacks in 2024. Trey Hendrickson had 17.5. It would be the missing piece for a contender. Number 3, Jaire Alexander to the worst cornerback depth chart in football after losing Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs. The Raiders desperately need a game-changing lockdown corner like Alexander for a 3rd round pick. The Packers may still be moving him. The 4th trade, George Pickens to the Dallas Cowboys. Talk about a perfect complement for CD Lamb, and Jerry Jones is just crazy enough to make this happen. Number 5, Jadeveon Clowney to the Detroit Lions. The Lions don't need much. I think for a 6th round pick, they could get a very solid veteran edge number 2 to complement Aiden Hutchinson. Clowney is powerful enough, quick enough, fast enough, physical enough to be a bite your kneecap Detroit Lion. At number 6, the Dallas Cowboys want Dallas Goedert. They wanted to trade for Dallas Goedert, but they're not going to be able to. The Carolina Panthers are going to, and they're going to trade Tremble and a 4th round pick for Dallas Goedert. One of the game's best tight ends, I think probably the most underrated consistently, led the Super Bowl champs in playoff receiving yards. That would give Bryce Young the final piece, the missing piece for his offense in year 3. Trade 7, Kirk Cousins to the Pittsburgh Steelers. If Aaron Rodgers does not smarten up and sign with the Steelers, then Kirk Cousins is going to steal his job, period. That's for a 5th round pick. And the 8th and final trade is Jalen Ramsey back to the Rams, back to where he won a Super Bowl, to be the secondary playmaker that is missing in LA to take them potentially back to the Super Bowl. Ramsey for a 3rd round pick. He gets out of Miami and he heads back west to LA. Those are the trades that I think could happen now that the draft is over. Thanks, guys, for watching. It's Mitch. Like the video if you're on YouTube. Check me out on the Bottom Line View YouTube channel where I cover all 32 NFL teams. And I'll see you next time on NFL Daily. This is Bleacher Report. Peace, guys.